investment insight series, Magellan Minutes. This series is designed to provide you with relevant and digestible talking points on global markets, each around 10 minutes. In this series, we're going to revisit some of the conversations we had earlier in the year and share our current views on the sectors and stocks in our global portfolios. We'll also ask our sector specialists what they'll be looking out for in 2021. My name is Jennifer Herbert, Key Account Manager at Magellan, and today I'll be talking to Magellan's Deputy CIO, Head of ESG and Portfolio Manager, Dom Giuliano, about our latest views on the payments networks. Thanks for joining us, Dom.
Good afternoon, Jen. It's a pleasure.
Dom, the move towards a cashless society accelerated during COVID, which has been a tailwind for payments companies. At the same time, travel credit card usage has been significantly down. How are the Visa and Mastercard businesses faring under these conditions?
Yeah, look, all the payment networks have had a very volatile year for obvious reasons. Visa and Mastercard experienced the worst of it back in the second quarter, so April through June. They are on a recovery path when it comes to volumes, but the travel and entertainment spend still continues to be much, much lower than it normally is. So, for example, they do report separately revenues gained from cross-border volumes, and those volumes are still down something like 40 to 45% at Visa and Mastercard. And indeed, if you want to have a look at American Express, they're down 70%. It shouldn't be surprising that people are not traveling, they're not spending offshore. However, within all of that, there is some good news as well. So there have been some very significant trends which have been accelerated because of the lockdowns and because of the fears of catching the virus. So there's been a rapid take-up of cashless payments, so the old tap and go, in places particularly like the United States, who are real laggards in tap and go, and that's really accelerated. The other area of acceleration, of course, is e-commerce. More people are staying at home and are having things delivered to them. And if you actually have a look at the statistics that are coming through from the payment networks, e-commerce payments are growing at somewhere between 20 to 30% per annum. Although from a smaller base, they are continuing to grow very, very rapidly. And so you're seeing a bit of a mix of things. There's some good news in there from a volumes perspective. There's also some bad news. Unfortunately, at the current time, it all balances out to sort of a somewhat negative. So if you're having a look at the volumes growth in the quarter through to 30 September, overall volumes at Visa and Mastercard were growing at something like 0 to 1%. Whereas if things were normal, they should have been growing at 10 to 15%. So really quite suppressed. And as you mentioned earlier, Jen, a lot of that suppression is in the travel and entertainment and the cross-border. And why that is really so important is that those lines of business tend to be very high yielding or high margin for them. And so that really is having an impact on the bottom line for them.
Right, and looking at the stocks from a valuation perspective, would you say that Visa and Mastercard are fairly priced?
Look, they're very close to being fairly priced, Jen. It's been a very volatile year. Interestingly, right now the share prices are higher than when we started, notwithstanding growth is lower, and there's been some significant impacts on volumes that we've just talked through. They really are getting towards a fairer value. You've got Mastercard is trading at something like 33, 34 times 2022 earnings, and Visa's at about 26, 27 times. So Mastercard is more expensive, but they have been exhibiting faster growth than Visa, and that would explain the gap. But they are certainly well priced given the circumstances and uncertainty that we still need to face over the coming year.
So Dom, what's the outlook for the companies into 2021, considering that we'll probably see some permanent changes in consumer behaviour?
Yeah. Look, that's a really interesting question and something to think through. Look, it's going to be a year of two halves, more than likely, 2021. So in the first half of the year, you'll start seeing the lapping of some very difficult volume experienced in the first half of this year. So you'll start seeing growth rates beginning to normalize, but still at lower absolute levels than they otherwise would have been in the first half. Then presumably, if everything goes to plan on the vaccination front, hopefully a good portion of the developed world and a growing portion of the developing world can look forward to being vaccinated around June, July, August, or the northern summer. And that does mean that we should see a resurgence in some of the volumes related to these higher margin business, so the cross-border travel, etc., in the second half of the year. So you'll probably see a significant pickup in growth in the second half. So I think it will be a tale of two halves, and hopefully the second half will begin to reflect a more normal environment. And as you point out, it's probably likely that you'll see that those e-commerce volumes which have come will probably remain elevated because people's habits and behaviors will have changed. And this time next year in the United States, the whole tap and go and cashless will probably become ingrained behaviors. And so those are definitely positives for the card networks, because that will have brought forward trends which otherwise might have taken 5 years to reach, right? And they've achieved it within a year.
Finally, we've seen the near-term tailwinds behind electronic payments spur growth in the payments networks. What do you see as the key medium-term threats?
Yeah. Look, the payment networks have had an incredible growth story over the last couple of decades as people have moved from cash and check to electronic payments. I think over the next couple of years, I really don't see any threats to the ongoing growth dynamic. You've got some incredible tailwinds behind them. We've already talked about them. The e-commerce tailwind is not going away. If anything, it'll intensify. Cashless payments will continue to intensify. Public policy is encouraging people to use electronic payments more and more and less cash, so that more tax revenues are collected. So there are some incredible tailwinds which will persist with us for some time. But it is also clear that over the medium to longer term, there are some significant threats that are emerging, particularly from sovereigns and central banks and disruption. So what do I mean by sovereigns and central banks? Look, as e-commerce continues to penetrate global economies, more and more of the payments are obviously being carried by two privately owned networks based out of the United States, and that carries systemic risk with it. Clearly, central banks and sovereigns want to remain in charge and in control of the payment systems in their own country. And in doing that, you're seeing the proliferation and encouragement of real-time payment systems in many countries around the world. And what real-time payment systems allow you to do is to literally move money from one bank account to another in the matter of seconds and at very, very low cost. So Jen, I could go to my Commonwealth Bank app right now and transfer you money from my bank account to your bank account just using your mobile phone number or your email address as the link between us. And that could happen in seconds and at very low cost, or indeed at no cost. And you're seeing those sorts of capabilities developing around the world. We're still in early days because people's behaviors haven't caught up to using that kind of technology. But once that catches on, that will certainly threaten the debit franchises of both Visa and Mastercard, and there will probably be flow-through impacts to American Express and Visa and Mastercard's credit card franchises as well. The other thing to note is that you do have significant innovation in the fintech space, in the financial technology space, and some of that innovation includes things like the ability to move money from one country to the other at very low cost. And those sorts of developments are really going to threaten some of the higher margin capabilities that Visa and Mastercard offer, and indeed many commercial banks offer right now. So, Jen, just to sum up, in the near term, the next couple of years, I have a high degree of confidence that Visa, Mastercard, American Express will continue to grow at a rapid clip because of the very strong tailwinds behind them in terms of the e-commerce take-up. But over the medium to longer term, we really do need to be aware that there are some emerging risks which could have a material impact on the fundamental franchises of these businesses.
Dom, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
It was a pleasure, Jen, and thank you for your questions.
And thank you to all of you for watching. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact one of the Magellan team and feel free to share this update with clients or colleagues as you see fit. Take care and stay well.